Hello, welcome back to my channel and welcome to this week's video where I'm gonna be telling you if I liked or not my anticipated book releases of 2024. So, in January of this year, I made a video talking about my anticipated book releases for the year, and in there I talked about 20 books, but 3 of them were actually, they ended up not being released this year, so I have 17 books to talk about, and I'm gonna talk about them in the order that, they were released, not in the order that I read them, because honestly, I don't remember the order that I read them, and the order in which they were released I have written down, so that would definitely be much easier for me. So that is what I'm gonna be doing. And the first book that was released that I was excited for, I think it had actually already been released when I filmed that video, and that was Mislaid in Parts Half Known. And that was the 9th book in the Wayward Children series, which is a series of fantasy novellas. And in that series, we follow a bunch of kids who go through magical doors that lead them to other worlds, and they explore those worlds, and they eventually do return to their original world, which I think is our world. And when they do, some of them really feel that place where they were before were where they really belong, then they don't really like being back. And there is a school that a lot of those kids go to, and the owner of the school herself had been in one of those worlds. And most of the kids that we follow, I mean, a lot of them we actually meet them while they are at the school, other we meet them when they're going into the doors, going through the doors. And this book specifically was following Nancy, and she had been the main character of the previous book as well. And in the previous book, we followed her finding the door, going through the door, going to that other world. And in this one, she is at that school, and she has a talent for finding things, and those things include the magical doors. So her school mates definitely are interested in that talent of hers because, like I said, a lot of them really want to go back to those worlds that they feel like they belong to more than their original world. So they want Nancy to find the doors for them. And so in this book, we actually go through a lot of doors, a lot of places. We explore a lot of places, but very briefly. And I have mixed feelings about this series because overall I do really like it. I really enjoy reading these books, but I always like the books that are more focused on discovering a new world and exploring a new world. And the books that are more about quests, I don't like as much. And usually there's one book about quest, and then one book about a world, and then a book about a quest, and then a book about exploring a world. And this one kind of mixed the two because, like I said, we explored a bunch of places, but it was all a big quest. So, it was kind of a mix of the two types of books. And also in the cover, there is a dinosaur. So I expected to spend a lot of time in a world with dinosaurs, but that was actually very, very brief. So that was a little disappointing, but like I said, we still got to explore a lot of worlds. And I do really love the main character, Nancy. I absolutely loved her in the first book that she was in, and I also really loved her in this one. So overall, I still really enjoyed it, but not as much as the previous one. The previous one, I think I gave 5 stars, or at least 4.5. And this one, I ended up giving 4 stars. The next book was Womb City, and this was a sci-fi horror. And in this book, we were following Nayla, and she was her body, or the body that she was living in, used to belong to someone else who died, and she was now using that body. And there's a whole kind of body hopping element to this world. And she has a microchip, and she is controlled by the police, including her husband, because he's part of the police. And they can control her memories, her location, everything. And obviously it's not a good relationship because he can literally control her with a microchip. And she does have a lover. And one night when she's out with her lover, they're driving, and they hit someone with their car, and that person ends up dying because the guy, he found a way to override the control of the microchip, so like they were able to be together. And yeah, that person that they run over ends up dying. And then Nayla starts being haunted by the ghost of that person. But even like the ghost is not really a ghost in the sense of like a typical horror book kind of ghost. It's definitely has a sci-fi element to what kind of ghost it was, which was definitely very fun. And like I really like the premise of this book, but I didn't really love the execution. Like I feel like there was so much going on at the same time, and a lot of the things that I wanted explained, like the world and how all the sci-fi elements worked, I feel like weren't explained enough. But then other things were repeated like so many times, and so I thought it was kind of repetitive in a way. And on the other hand, I didn't think there was like enough explanation of the things that I wanted to understand. And yeah, I was very confused, which might definitely be like my problem and not the book's problem, but it didn't work for me. So like I said, I really like the concept, I really like the idea, and I really think that it had a lot of important discussions, but I didn't love the execution. So sadly, it didn't really work for me, and I ended up giving it 2.5 stars. The next book is A Reckless Oath, and this is book 2 of the Heartless Fates maybe series, maybe trilogy. I at first thought it was a duology, but it's not. There's gonna be at least one other book, so you know it's at least a trilogy, and it is fantasy. And the main character in this book is called Calliope or Kala, and she is a witch. And just like every witch in this world, her fate is connected to the witch's dice. And basically, she literally throws like a dice, and the number that she gets is like connected to her fate. And there are a certain number of rules that everyone has. And basically, her fate is connected to like a future war that is coming with like the gods, and it could mean the destruction of her people. And so obviously she doesn't like that that's her fate, and she wants to change her fate. And in the first book, she meets someone who is also looking to change his fate, and they hear of someone in the never-ending forest who can actually change their fate. And so in the first book, they go into the never-ending forest and they go through a number of trials to reach that person that can possibly change their fates. And obviously things don't go as expected as always. And the ending of the first book was insane. A lot of things happened that the characters were not expecting, and they weren't like, you know, very good for them. And so in the second book, we were dealing with the aftermath of that, and Kala's two best friends were also in trouble, especially one of them because she was taken somewhere else. And with that, we were able to learn also a lot about, you know, that other place, because there are a lot of like different like mythical creatures, I guess, in the story. There are witches, there are Valkyries, there are sirens, and I think there's something else that I'm forgetting. But yeah, we learn more about the other types of creatures, not just the witches, and we also get to see more places in the world. We get to see the, you know, the places where the sirens live, or the places where the Valkyries live, and also we explore more of the never-ending forest. And I really enjoyed it. I really do like the main characters in this book. I don't like especially care about the romance plot, and the romance plot is very much like needed for the story. It's very much like part of the main issue happening here. So I don't like necessarily care too much about that, but other than that, I do really enjoy it. And the epilogue definitely makes me kind of worried for the next book. Like, it wasn't explicitly said like about who it was, but with everything that happened in the book, I think it was pretty obvious like what was happening. So I am intrigued and worried, and I do really want to read the next book when it comes out next year. And yeah, I did give this 4 stars, which I think is also what I gave to the first book in the series. Then the next book was The Invocations, and this was a fantasy horror, and it is what it followed 3 main characters. And the first one was Zara, and her sister had died a while back, and she was trying to, you know, learn magic to try to figure out a way to learn a way to bring her sister back to life. And then we also had Jude, who, after a deal with the demon had gone wrong, her soul was kind of dying, and even her body was kind of dying as well, and everything around her was kind of decaying. And so she was also trying to find a witch to help her with that situation. And then we have Emmer, who is an actual witch, and she could, be the solution to both of the other characters' problems. But her former clients, Emmer's former clients, are all being killed. And so Emmer agrees to help the other two if they also help her trying to investigate like who's killing her clients and why. And I mean, now that they're gonna be her clients as well, they better figure it out, or they might also be killed by whoever is after Emmer's clients. And I absolutely loved this book. Like, it had everything that I love. It was very witchy, it was very creepy, it was very gory and gross in some situations, and had like some body horror that I absolutely loved. And I also really, really loved the three main characters that we were following and their like friendship. And there was also like a subtle romance subplot that I actually enjoyed. And it's so rare that I enjoy romance. So I was very happy about that. And I think like this was literally the perfect book for me. It had everything that I liked. I loved every single second of reading it. And I mean, horror fantasy is definitely like a good mix. I tend to enjoy those two together because I do love fantasy. It's definitely my favorite genre, and I also do really like horror. And the two combined do usually work for me. And yeah, I absolutely love this book, and I gave it 5 stars. The next book was What Feasts at Night, which was horror, and this was the second book in the Sworn Soldier series. And in this series, we follow Alex, who used to be a soldier. And in the first book, they get called to their friend's house because she was dying, like the Alex friend. And when they get there, they see that even like all the wildlife around the house is kind of decaying, is kind of dying as well. And there are like weird, I mean, not that the wildlife creatures are weird themselves, but they have like weird behaviors. And I absolutely loved that book, the first one. I think I gave it 4.5 stars. And in this one, Alex goes back to their hometown. And when they get to their house, like the person that was taking care of Alex's house has died, like in weird circumstances. And the people in the town, they talk about a creature that steals people's breaths. And Alex doesn't really, believe in that, but they do have to admit that there are weird things happening, and there are even weird things happening in their dreams. And I still really enjoyed this book, but not as much as the first one. And I feel like that's because there weren't as many disturbing and gross scenes as in the first book. Especially in the first half of the book, it was kind of like more chill. But I mean, in the second half, there were definitely some weird ass scenes, very creepy, very disgusting, that I absolutely loved. Like, that's what I was going into this book for, because the first one was really, really just weird and disgusting in the best way possible, because I do really like that in my horror books. And this one wasn't as much. It was still like pretty creepy, and it had a few gross scenes like in the second half of the book. And I do really, really like following Alex as our main character, and even like their friend that we also saw in the first book. And in this one, I also really like him. And yeah, I do really like the characters, and overall I still really enjoyed it, and just not as much as the first one, and I gave it 4 stars. Then we have Where Sleeping Girls Lie, which is a mystery, and in this one we are following Shade, and she goes to like a prestigious, very prestigious boarding school after being homeschooled her whole life. And when she gets there, she gets introduced to her roommate, who's called Elizabeth, and Elizabeth like shows her around the school. And in the first night that Shade is there, Elizabeth goes missing, and now people think that Shade had something to do with it. And at the same time, like, no one really cares to investigate what happened to Elizabeth. Only Elizabeth's best friend, so he and Shade are investigating together. And Shade also gets the attention of like the popular girls group, and we see her dealing with that as well. And the two of them are investigating, and there are like a lot of secrets in the school. Like, almost everyone has secrets, but there are also a lot of secrets like about Shade's past and her family, and we also find that out. And I like absolutely love this book. I had seen, like before reading it, I had seen some reviews saying that it was, very slow, too slow. And I mean, it was definitely not fast. Like, I absolutely agree with that. It was not fast. And usually I do tend to like faster paced books, but somehow this really, really worked for me. I absolutely love this book. Like, I devoured this book. And I think maybe it was because I really loved the main character. So I was happy, just following her on her day to day life. I didn't really need that much to be happening for me to be interested and for me to be invested. And yes, like I was absolutely invested in the mystery, and I did like the reveals and like learning all of the secrets that everyone had. But also, I was just content following Sade. Like, that was just good enough for me as well. So yeah, I absolutely love this. It definitely really, really worked well for me. And I gave this one 5 stars. Next up, we have The Weavers of Alamaxa, which was the second and last book in the Alamaxa duology, which is fantasy. And in this book, we followed two main characters, and the first one was Nahil, and she was a water weaver, and all that she wanted in the first book was to go to the academy to learn how to, use her powers better. But her family just wanted her to marry some rich guy, and she kind of had to. But so she makes a deal with that guy who's called Nico, and he's actually in love with someone else. So they, make a deal. They agree to get married, and she doesn't care that he's with someone else because she doesn't really want to be married to him. She just wants to go to the academy, and he will like sign a paper saying that he's okay with her to going to the academy, and she will go and she will learn how to use her powers. And so the one that I mentioned that Nico is in love with is Georgina, and she is an earth weaver, and she has like very strong powers, but also kind of uncontrollable. She doesn't really know how to, well, control her powers, like I said. And she is part of a women's rights group, which is called the Daughters of Izdahar, which was the title of the first book. And then Nahil also gets connected with that group, and they meet and they, are working together. And not only are they fighting for their rights, they're also fighting against some people from like another kingdom that appear that like really hate weavers, and they want to eliminate all weavers. So they're also fighting against those people, obviously. And the ending of the first book, like, one of the characters was like in a really, really, really horrible situation. And so in the second book, we are seeing how the characters deal with the situations that they were put in, especially, the one that I said was in a really, really terrible situation, and how they keep fighting for everything that they're fighting for. And I also really, really enjoyed this one. And I feel like, it had a lot of action. This book was very action packed. Like, there was always something happening, and there was a lot of fighting, which I really, really enjoyed the fight scenes. But at the same time, I feel like we had enough time to, connect with the characters even more and to see their friendships and other relationships develop. And there was actually something that happened to a character that I really did not see coming. I was really shocked. And the ending was definitely like bittersweet, but I feel like it was perfect for this sort of story specifically. Like, I wasn't really expecting a perfectly happy ending, like tied up in a bow. That's not what I expected from this book, because I don't think that's it would fit like as well with the story. But I do still really like how it ended for both of our main characters. And yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 stars, which I think is also what I gave the first book in the duology. Next book is Alien Clay, which is sci-fi. And in this book, we are following Arden, and he is sent to prison. And there is actually a planet that serves as a prison, which is it's called Kiln, the planet. And Arden is sent there because he was part of a political activist group that kind of like failed on the mission that they had, and they were found out. And so he and a lot of the other people who were part of that group were sent to Kiln as prisoners. And when they get to Kiln, they see that, I mean, the people who were there before obviously had already seen that there are like buildings, structures that have writing on them. And so the people who are like in charge, they want to find out who built those structures because they were not made by humans, because they were already there before any humans got there. And they were obviously also not created by the animal type creatures that are from Kiln. So they want to find out who built those structures, and they use the prisoners to go like on missions to explore the planet to try to figure out clues of who had been there before. And so we follow Arden and the other prisoners there who going out on those missions to explore. And Kiln is definitely like, the wildlife is very dangerous, it's very deadly, and we see someone that has been exposed to some specific type of that wildlife, and they had like kind of, lost their mind. And so there's also that danger, not just physical danger, but also, that. And so they are very concerned. And I also really, really like this one. And just like every book that I've read from this author, the like reveal of what was happening was like kind of crazy and kind of mind-blowing. And I really, really loved it. Like, I really love every book from this author. And yeah, I also really love the world building, getting to know all those creatures that existed on that planet. And also the characters are very interesting because they weren't just like black or white. Obviously, they were very gray, even the main character that we're following. And yeah, I really, really loved it. It just didn't give me like the 5-star feeling, but I really absolutely loved it. And so I give it 4.5 stars. Next up, we have This Skin Was Mine and Other Disturbances, which was a horror book. It was like actually a collection of short stories. It had 4 short stories, and they were all about like toxic, violent relationships, and they were like family relationships, romantic relationships, friendships, different kinds of relationships, but all of them pretty toxic. And so the first short story was called The Skin Was Once Mine, and we were following Jillian. And in the beginning of the story, she gets called about like her father's death, and so she goes back to the house that she had been banished from 20 years ago. And when she gets there, she finds out like a lot of secrets that her father actually had, and she, finds out that he was actually not that great person that she thought that he was, because she just thought that her mom was like the bad one, but that her father was, a good person. And, she finds out some secrets that maybe he wasn't. And this was very disturbing, and I absolutely loved it. And then we had Seedling, the next short story, in which a son gets called by his dad that's about like his mother's death. And so he goes to see his father, and his father has like some wounds on him that have like black threads. And then the main character that we're following, like the son, also starts getting those wounds. And this one was really gross in like a body horror way, which I do really enjoy. And I didn't like it as much as the first one, but I still did really enjoy this one. And then the third short story was All the Parts of You That Won't Easily Burn. And in this one, we have a guy who goes to a shop to buy like a carving knife. And the shopkeeper like demands a weird payment. And then that leads to like a whole obsession that the client who got the knife starts having. And this one was so disturbing, so gross, so good. This one was definitely my favorite. Like, I absolutely loved this one. Like, this short story, 5 stars. Absolutely loved it. And then the fourth and last one was called Prickle, and this one was about 2 friends who every time they like got together, they played like a pretty sadistic game. And this one I didn't really love. I don't know why this one didn't work for me. Like, it was disturbing, but not the kind of disturbing that I like. And I think it was just, I don't know, like pointlessly mean. And I mean, I guess you can say that about the other short stories as well. But this one just didn't work for me, and the others really did. But overall, I did really like this collection of short stories, and I gave it 4 stars. Next up, we have The Familiar, and this one was historical fiction and fantasy. And like, even though this one was one of my anticipated releases, I had like mixed expectations about it because, like I said before, I love fantasy, but I don't usually like historical fiction. So I was excited about it, but not as excited as I was about other books because there's this whole historical fiction element. And so this one was set in Madrid in the 16th century, and we're following Lucia, and she worked as a scullion, and she could use some magic, and she usually would use like some bits of magic just to help her get through the days. But one day, like, her employer sees her using magic, and so she wants to use Lucia to help her own family, like, social status. Like, she wants Lucia to perform. And so one day in one of those performances, there is like the king's disgraced secretary, and he wants to like regain the king's trust. And so he finds Lucia and he wants to use her in a competition. And so he takes Lucia to that competition, and while she's there, there is a guy that's immortal, and he's called Santangel, and he is helping Lucia, like, with her magic and everything. And the two of them start developing a friendship, and then, more than a friendship. And like, I kind of like characters. I didn't like particularly love any of them, but like, they were okay. I kind of liked them, and I thought the magic was definitely interesting. But I don't know, I never really like connected too much to the characters or like the story, and I was like kind of bored. And I guess historical fiction just, it isn't for me, or maybe I just, haven't found the right author for me yet. But yeah, so far all the historical fiction books that I've read, which admittedly haven't been many because I know that I don't usually like it, so I don't, tend to read a lot of it. But yeah, the ones that I have read have not really, worked for me. And so yeah, it was just okay. Like, I didn't dislike it, but I also didn't, love it like other books from this author that I've read and loved. This one was not the case. It was just okay, and I gave it 3 stars. Next, we have Ghost Station, and this one was sci-fi horror, and we were following Ophelia, who was a psychologist, and she specialized in ERS, which is a space-based condition that basically makes people very violent, and it had already resulted in some violent murders before. And so basically that happened because like being in space messes with people's like circadian rhythms, and it messes with their mind, and some people just, lose it and become very violent. And so she was assigned to an exploratory team who was going to like another planet, and they didn't really want her there, but she was like very determined to help. And honestly, like, there was one thing that was mentioned in the synopsis, which is like a death that only happened like 60% into the book. And until that point, I was like, what even is the plot of this book? Like, there is nothing happening other than, the other characters being annoyed by Ophelia's presence. And honestly, me too, because she was kind of annoying to me as well. And just, her trying really, really hard to help and to be part of the group. And after, that happened, like the last third, I guess, was definitely better than the rest of the book. There were a couple creepy scenes, but overall I feel like it was more of a thriller than a horror book. And yeah, this one was just okay as well. And it was one of my anticipated releases because I had read the other book by this author which was also sci-fi horror, and like I absolutely loved it. So I expected to also love this one, but yeah, it was just okay, and I also gave this one 3 stars. Then we have Blood Justice, which was the second book in the Blood Deads. Once again, I thought it was a duology. Now I hope it's not, because this book ended in an absolutely crazy way, so it better not be a duology. But yeah, it's fantasy, and we were following 2 twins, Christina and Clem. And in the beginning of the first book, their mom is like really, really sick. But then they find out that she wasn't really sick, she was cursed. And so they have in the first book to figure out who, curse her and like who wants to hurt their family. And there's also like a rival family that they have some issues with. Like, historically, they have issues with each other, and they are like the 2 most influential, important families in like their magical society. And they also have like very different relationships with their magic, like Christina and Clem, because Christina used to be like super skilled with her magic. She used to use it all the time, but then a spell that she cast actually caused her father's death, so she understandably was kind of traumatized by using her magic, and so she stopped using her magic. This is not a spoiler, this is all in the synopsis of the first book. And Clem, on the other hand, used his magic like all the time, even though he was never really as skilled as his sister. He used his magic all the time, and it was kind of like a way for him to escape, the issues that he was having in his life. And the ending of the first book was, kind of explosive, kind of violent. And even though it was like close enough for like what they were exploring in that first book, it left like enough stuff open for the second book. And so in the second book, we are exploring the things that were, not resolved in the first book, and also the aftermath of the things that were resolved. And also there are like more families now that are in conflict, not just, the twins family and that other family. There are like more families in the mix. And there's also like an anti-magic group of protesters that they also have to deal with. And there is a lot going on. Like, these main characters are dealing with a lot. And I was definitely worried throughout like almost the entire book, because one of the characters was like going down a revenge path, and like they were, doing some dangerous things that I was very concerned about. And yeah, like I said, the ending was insane, and I need there to be another book because it cannot end like this. And yeah, I also really enjoyed this one, and I gave it 4 stars. Then we have My Darling Dreadful Thing, which was horror, and in this book we were following Ross, and she could see ghosts, and she had like actually a ghost that was bonded to her, and she would perform seances that her mom would like make her perform, and the ghost that was bonded to her would like possess her so she could, I guess, perform better. And in one night, when she's performing one of the seances, there is a woman there called Agnes, who is there because her husband had just died. And she actually, like we later find out, that she also can see ghosts, and she also has like a ghost bonded to her. And she wants to take Ross home with her. And then we see like all of the mysteries that are part of that house. And we also have like some sections in the book of like fast forward basically, and Ross is being like, she's talking to a doctor because we know that someone has died, and Ross is the main suspect, but she keeps saying that it was one of the ghosts who did it. And obviously the doctor doesn't believe in ghosts, and like Ross has to kind of prove that she is, not insane, but also she is innocent. And we are seeing how she deals with all of that. And also we are finding out what happened in the chapters from the past, I suppose. And, this book in theory had like everything for me to love it. It had ghosts. It was gross. Like, it had a lot of body horror scenes that were pretty gross. It was sapphic. It was like, in theory, everything that I should like. But it didn't really work for me, and I think I never really like connected to the characters or the story. Like, it was just okay, and yeah, I was a bit disappointed by it because, like I said, it had everything for me to like absolutely love it, to be absolutely obsessed with it, and I wasn't. There was like nothing that I can say that I actively like disliked about this book. There's nothing that I can say that I actively loved either. So yeah, it was just okay, and I gave it 3 stars. Then we have Mirrored Heavens, which is the third and last book in the Between Earth and Sky trilogy, which is fantasy. And this one, like the first book, starts off mostly set in the holy city of Tova, where the Sun Priest has foreseen that there is an upcoming celestial event that will bring basically like a big change in the world. And then we are also following a captain on a ship called Shiala, and she is transporting a very mysterious passenger who's called Serapio, and he is connected to a god who's not the sun god. That's like the main god, like in Tova. Like I said, we have the Sun Priest. And yeah, he's connected to another god, and he is being taken to Tova, and he is part of that, big change that will happen in the world. And I really loved the first 2 books in this series for different reasons. Like, in the first book, we had a lot of action, a lot of things happening, and I absolutely loved all of that. And in this second one, it was definitely slower. We were learning more about the characters and the politics, and it was just like the preparation for the big thing to come. And so I loved both of these books for different reasons. And this one I loved as well. I can just start by saying that. It was really complicated in this book because, or in this series, because it started before, it's not just in this book. But I really love characters like from both sides of like this war, this conflict that is happening. And so I didn't really want anyone to lose, so I didn't know like which side I was rooting for. So that was very complicated, and like I couldn't really see a way for it to end in which, you know, it would be happy for everyone. And in this book, we actually got to explore a lot of the world, like a lot more, because the characters were like pretty scattered, and we were following more characters than in the previous books, and they were in a lot of different areas of the world. So we got to explore a lot of that. And we also got to learn a lot about the past and like connections that characters had that we didn't know about yet. And I love it. Like I was on the edge of my seat and I absolutely love it. The ending was definitely bittersweet, but like I said, I couldn't imagine an ending that wasn't. So, you know, there's that. And yeah, I really, really, really loved it. And I gave it 4.5 stars because, you know, it just didn't give me the feeling. And I think that's also what I rated the other two books in the series. So yeah, 4.5 stars. Next up, we have The Mercy of Gods, which is book 1 in the Captives War series, which is sci-fi. And in this one, at first, we're following a group of scientists, and the main character is called Daphid. And actually, something I really appreciated was that, you know, they were talking about molecular biology. It was like, you know, a sci-fi kind of molecular biology, not really something that happened, at least yet. But, you know, it was something that I can understand, like a sci-fi that I can understand, because when it's all just, you know, space talk and like physics, I don't know that. I don't understand anything. I just believe what they tell me. But in this one, we had a sci-fi that I could understand, and that, you know, made sense in a very futuristic, like doesn't actually happen kind of way, but it could make sense. So I appreciated that. And in this world, humans live on a planet called Engine. Even though like no one really knows how they got there, they live on Engine. And they start seeing like something approaching their planet, and that something is the Carracks. And the Carracks are like conquerors of the universe, really, and they basically take other species, other aliens, people, like creatures from other planets, as slaves. And when they get to Engine, they take like the top people in like different areas in different kinds of jobs, and Daphid and his group of scientists are part of the people who are taken. And so they are, you know, taken somewhere else, and they are given like some challenges. And here, like in the back, in the last like line of the synopsis, it says, swept up in a conflict beyond his control and vaster than his imagination, Daphid is poised to become humanity's champion and its betrayer, which I thought was very intriguing. And when we got to the betrayal, like it was so good. I mean, when we were getting to it, I was already like, I'm pretty sure this is what's gonna happen, and it was. And like it was so good. It was better than what I was expecting, like before getting to it. It was so good. I absolutely loved it. And there's also like another alien species that is the enemy of the Carracks, and he's like actively trying to fight them, but like kind of from the shadows. And that's also like a very interesting plot. And I like love to learn about the different alien species, and obviously the Carracks and that enemy of the Carracks. And I love it so much. And I just thought as well that the pacing was perfect. Like I was hooked literally from the prologue. Like I loved it so much. It was even better than I expected, and I expected it to be great. So yeah, absolutely loved it, and obviously I gave it 5 stars. Next up, we had Ghostsmith, which was the second book in the House of the Dead duology, which was fantasy. And in the series, we start by following Ren, who is a bonesmith, which is the title of the first book. And she wants to be a Valkyr, which are like some specialized warriors. And in the beginning of the first book, she is like in a competition to become a Valkyr, but things happen and she's actually not able to become a Valkyr. And she learns that the prince has been kidnapped and he was taken like beyond the wall. And Red wants to prove herself after she failed to become a Valkyr. So she decides that she's going to go and rescue the prince. And while she is, on her mission, she meets an ironsmith. And like ironsmiths and bonesmiths are historically like not friends, but they do have to find a way to work together. And while they are beyond the wall, they find like people and magic that shouldn't really exist anymore. And so they are dealing with all of that and all of the betrayal that happens in this book. And, there are people who want that magic that shouldn't exist, and they have to deal with that as well. And we also learn a lot about the past and also about like Ren and her family. And like the first book in this duology was my last 5-star book of last year. So, I had definitely very high expectations. And although I did enjoy this book like quite a bit, I didn't love it as much as the first one. And like, I don't know if I just read that one at the right time, or if I read this one at the wrong time, or if it truly wasn't like as good as the first one. But like, yeah, I still really enjoyed it. I still really like the characters, and I still really like the plot, and I was invested and I had a good time. I didn't love it as much as the first one, but I still ended up giving it 4 stars. And now for our final book, which was The Queen, which was horror. And this one we're following Margaret. And the book actually starts with her like hiding, trying to get away from the creatures that are surrounding her, because she is like hiding from people who have like merged with insects, and they are like a weird, scary kind of hybrid. And so she's, trying to escape from that. And then we flash back to a couple days before, and her best friend Charity had gone missing, and she was, obviously trying to figure out what happened to her. And then she finds a phone like on her doorstep, and she, gets the phone, and she's being contacted by seemingly Charity, and Charity's like trying to guide her somewhere. And we also learned that Charity was part of a like gene manipulation experiment. And in the first half, I was very confused and I was a bit bored, maybe because I was confused and like I wasn't understanding what was happening, and like I wasn't really connecting to anything. But in the second half, I definitely understood what was happening, and I thought it was like much better than the first half. And there were a lot of like gross body horror scenes, as you can imagine, with human and insect hybrids. And also like it was pretty exciting, like what was happening. I was like on the edge of my seat at the end. And yeah, the second half was definitely like way better than the first. But like, since I didn't love the first half, I didn't like love the book, but it was still a good time. I still enjoyed it. And like I said, it had a lot of gross scenes that I really appreciated in this horror book. And I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. And so I had 1 2.5-star book. I had 3 3-star books. I had 1 3.5-star book. I had 7 4-star books. I had 2 4.5-star books, and I had 3 5-star books. And the funny part is that the 3 books that I gave 5 stars to were the 3 that I have physically. And like, I bought them all before I knew they were gonna be 5 stars. Like, I bought them before I read them. And like, this one I ordered because I was pretty sure it was gonna be 5 stars, because the other series that I read from these authors is a 5-star series for me. So like, I was pretty sure I was gonna absolutely love this. So like, this one was definitely a 5-star prediction. But these 2, like, I just bought them because I found them like on a bookstore that I walked into. And like, this one I had, like, when I bought it, I had already seen some mixed reviews for it. So like, I didn't know if I was gonna love it, because I had seen that it was slow, and I don't usually love slow books, but I love this one. But I still bought it because it was one of my anticipated releases, so like, I was gonna read it. And also because the cover is absolutely beautiful. And this one, I actually hadn't read that many reviews when I bought this, so I didn't really know what to expect. But yeah, the 3 that I have physically were actually the 3 that I gave 5 stars to. So I love how that worked out. And the like average rating for these 17 books was 3.94 stars. So I guess I know myself pretty well and can predict what books I'm gonna enjoy, overall. So I guess to answer the question of this video, yes, I did like my anticipated releases. And yeah, that is everything for this video. So thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you have enjoyed it. And if you did, give it a like and subscribe. And I will talk to you next time. Bye!